So this workshop is really about taking the next step or two in Farm to School program. So wherever you are now, we will work together in a collaborative learning environment to talk about taking next steps. So in the spirit of collaboration and learning, we just have a couple simple rules for today. We'd like everyone to participate. We learn best when we engage with the topic that we're learning about. We have some activities and some thinking exercises for you today. And we have a wheelbarrow of tools. I did like that farm thing there. Why yet? No. Question, be inquisitive, ask questions. We want you to walk away from this seminar today, from this session, knowing some things and being able to respond to questions is what we're here for. So we're going to ask for questions at the end of each section and give you a chance to interact with us. Teamwork, we're all at different levels in Farm to School. There's some great things happening out there. There's some great not yet things happening out there. So together we can learn and help each other grow. I've already learned a ton of stuff today. So that's it. The most important thing is smile, even if you're not having fun. It's much easier for Brian, Jeremy, and I to carry this on if we think you're at least enjoying it, okay? Woo! Are there producers in the room today? I see Mr. Calicrate back there. Any other producers of food in the room? So I guess I'm talking to you, Mike. So often we take things for granted. It's like we're texting through life. We don't really look up and see where we're going. And I have to tell you that was true for me for a long time, especially when it came to food. And as I talked about this morning, that changed drastically a few years ago. And so I just wanted to thank the people who are here today, and they're in other seminars, obviously. But we do have at least one food producer in the room, and just to give you a thanks for growing our food. It does make a difference, and farmers and food growers rock in my book. We lost a presenter.
Keep dodging. All right, so kind of the flow of our presentation today, we're going to start with why in the world. So we know that Farm to School is not the easiest thing in the world on either end. So why do you even want to venture into that? So we're going to explore that. Facing our fears, what's stopping us? For each of us, that can be a different issue. So we're going to take a look at some of those. If you're not doing Farm to School yet on either end, there's probably a reason for that. So we want to address some of those potential fears and concerns. Knowing local agriculture, we're going to try and understand what's available, understand seasonality, how that plays in a state that doesn't have a year-long growing season, and how can we maximize that. And then really the bulk of our presentation is talking about developing a plan. We want to be able, when you leave today, to have some things on your paper, some next steps, and really provide you with a lot of tools and resources that you can use to start your journey and help you be successful. And the whole message today will be start small. And so we'll talk about that as well.
All right, like Rick mentioned, a lot of what we're going to talk today and really try to provide you are the tools necessary to do what we've been talking about all day. And that's creating those partnerships, developing those plans to make this all happen. We think that's, Jeremy, Rick, and I all think that's very crucial in this whole process. I mean, we could talk till we turn blue, but if we don't tell you how to do it or show you how to do it, it's kind of pointless. So hopefully you'll be able to resource or go to our website and take a look at some of these tools we have available. And then just know that the three of us are resources as you try to move forward. And we're available to help you do that. So when we see the tractor, did it move across the screen? When you see the tractor on our PowerPoints, those relate to food safety and food costs. As you know, cost is always an issue. We've heard it come up a couple times already today. Just from our experience, just know that cost it's a relative term. It's when we look at costs, when we talk about costs in our district, or when I analyze that, I'm looking at labor as a fixed cost almost, because it's already built in the budget. So then I look at how do I increase our skill sets of our employees so that the labor cost remains the same. We produce more output with less food costs. So from our standpoint, it actually reduces our food costs by going farm to school. I do have a resource on here if you're interested in looking at it. It's a produce calculator. Complements of U.S. Foods. I found this on their website, but it basically calculates food costs from a raw standpoint to a processed item, and it also factors in the labor cost involved in making that happen based off of normal ratios. So please take a look at that, and it'll help you develop some of your first choice decisions. Sorry. Okay, so I actually get the pleasure of introducing the plunger aspect, and this was Rick's little joke for me. So the plunger concept, when you see a plunger on any of our screens, we're gonna stop and take a look at some of the tools that we have available online for you. We'll also mention some other resources that may be available, and some of these resources have already come up in the topics of conversations today. So we may go in more depth if we have time and take a look at some of those resources, or we may just skip and keep moving forward.
So this website, the www.dlevin.org/fns/pages/f2s/nextsteps.aspx. Write that down if you don't have that in your handouts today. But that is what is up on this right-hand PowerPoint up here. Our projection system is. We're going to be going through those tools that we put online today as a part of this presentation. We created this specially for today. There's a ton of tools that we'll be talking about today, and it's a great resource, so please utilize that. So why in the world would I want to venture outside my comfort zone, go beyond what I think I already know, and what looks to me to be possibly more work for myself and maybe my staff? Why do I want to buy fresh Colorado-grown produce? Well, right next to WKRP in Cincinnati is a major station called WIFM. That's what's in it for me. So we're going to talk about what's in it for me today, and that's where you really find the ROI, the return on investment. And truly, the return on investment is children's health. The fewer miles that a fresh item has to travel, the longer it has to sit in a cooler. The less time that it has to sit in a cooler, the fresher the product is. The fresher the product is, the better quality it is in aspects of nutrition, texture, and taste. If it looks better, it tastes better, and students will eat it. We found that. Food from a farm is real, nothing artificial, no added chemicals, no added colors, no added flavorings. And some of these chemicals used in our food system today are being questioned as to their impact on health, and some of the research is pretty staggering. So I'm no food scientist, but I know how I feel when I eat good food. I also know how I feel when I eat food with stuff in it. I call it garbage food. When I eat good food, I feel great and my performance improves. It's really the same with kids. Local food also hasn't been irradiated. Irradiated is food that has been exposed to high levels of gamma rays, X-rays, or electron beams to kill bacteria in the food. And some irradiation doesn't eliminate all bacteria from food. All irradiation doesn't eliminate bacteria from food. And since foods can be contaminated and recontaminated just in the cooking process. So it doesn't prevent foodborne illnesses, but what it does do is it changes the flavor of food, it changes the texture, and in fact there was a Consumer Reports panel that looked at that and said that the taste of food was dramatically altered in both chicken and beef products. So because fresh food doesn't come from a can on a shelf, doesn't come from a freezer, it has its natural texture and consistency. And kids really pick up on that. As we've made our move going back to scratch cooking, the comments that we've been getting about the quality of food is fantastic. And I say that, you know, if we're going to move kids from a diet of mostly sugar, mostly fat, mostly salt, to food that's good for them, to healthy, sustainable food, the food has to taste fantastic. The food has to taste great. And so we want our food to be fresh to be able to accomplish that. Food traveled fewer miles. It's also better for the environment. We heard about that this morning. Today, the average American foodstuff traveled 1,500 miles before it arrived to your plate. Because locally food grown has traveled fewer miles and utilized lower amounts of fossil fuels to make it to your plate, it is actually can be less expensive than what we're buying from California, Texas, or Florida. And it's especially true when we're talking about seconds, which we'll get into, grade B produce that we can use quite effectively in our programs. So, and one final thought, or another in it, you know, what's in it for me, what's in it for you? A University of Minnesota study found that small farms with a gross income of $100,000 or less, so we're talking about small farms here, purchased almost 95% of their farm-related expenditures within their local communities. So it really does have an impact on what's happening in our community.
All right, facing our fears. So maybe you're not terrified of farm to school, but let's face it, if you're not already in farm to school in the game, there's something holding you back. So maybe it's just information, you've come to the right place today, but maybe there are other factors. So we want to explore some of those, and that'll be a part of our presentation. Farm to school is not easy, but it is manageable if you have a plan in place, no matter if you're a grower or a food service director or whatever your role is. So some things that we often hear, food safety, you know, I get that a lot. How do we ensure that the produce that we're purchasing is safe? And that's an important thing, that we ensure that. You know, handling farm to school produce isn't really different than handling produce that I buy from other traditional vendors. And so we're going to take a common sense approach to developing our farm to school produce safety protocols, and we'll give you some tools for that today. Cost can be a barrier, but oftentimes it's just a perceived barrier, and we've talked about that today. You know, there are ways to contain costs, and farm to school programs can operate within existing funding streams. It's really just redirecting your dollars, and so we'll look at that and understand how can we make our efforts in farm to school still fit in our budget. Procurement regulations, so if you attended the last session, you got a great education on that, so we'll touch on it a little bit, but understanding how they apply to farm to school purchasing, and depending on your threshold, you know, that can be different for your district. But really the recent clarifications of the law have opened the doors wide open to local procurement. Unfamiliar, uncomfortable, you know, you've made the right step being here today if that's one of the barriers for you. We're going to talk today about planning and starting small. That's really the key to a great implementation. And hopefully the resources that you'll see that we've put on our website and the other resources you've gathered today will help you become familiar with that and have a comfort level with starting a program. Are there any other things that are holding you back? This is your interactive portion. So, yes?
Public perception.
Public perception.
Of all of these things.
Okay, of
How
all
do
of
you
these
get that
things.
word out in the right way?
Okay.
We're going to address that. We've got a piece about marketing and service and how that looks, so thank you.
Anything else? All right, well, let's move on. Chef Brian?
Okay, so basically, anytime you look at farm to school, it's all about change management. It's, you know, there's 3 basic rules to change management. First one being only pick 1 to 2 items at a time to work on. Lay out your plan in detail would be number 2, and then involve your team in pre and post execution or whatnot. If you conduct more than 1 to 2 changes at a time, you'll never be able to adequately measure your outcomes without having your plan in detail. There's no way to accommodate the surprises that eventually pop up, and there will always be surprises. You may plan on having one person do a specific job, they don't show up, what's going to happen? If you don't have your plan laid out, it's just not going to work out. If your team isn't behind you, then there's no reason to do it or to even try. And these are some of the things that you need to work out prior to even starting. Decide what is achievable for your district or your school, when you can start and finish, Since we are a state that doesn't grow produce all year round, we need to work around the produce availability. Where will the product come from? Who will be affected? Which kitchens? Do you have a centralized kitchen? Do you have one kitchen that you want to have all your produce be handled through? What does that all look like? And we have a variety of tools we can look at later on for that. Present your plan to your stakeholders. Who are your stakeholders? Are you going to approach the board first and get them behind you? Are you going to approach your team first in order to develop that plan? I mean, what does that all look like for your specific district? Market your efforts before you begin. That's important. I mean, why go through all this work if you're not going to let everybody know about it? Let the community know. Get them behind you. Your team and the board as well, of course. Survey your results. That's why you want to pick only 1 to 2 items to work on, so that you can measure those results and find out what exactly those changes did for you. And then congratulate your team. That's always important. They like the pat on the back, and then you can begin on your next project. Okay, do we have the handout up here? All right, start small to grow big. You heard Rick actually reference this earlier this morning. We think this is a crucial way to begin any process or any journey. You don't want to jump into something and not be ready for what's going to happen. So if you start small and grow big, you're going to be better prepared. And then referencing back to what Rick was talking about, what's in it for me, take some time either on your own, with your team, or right now, and jot down a few reasons why farm to school is important to you. Why are you even here today? And what does that look like for your district?
So you'll notice the plunger up there. The plunger means that there's something on the website that we put there for you. So when I pull that up, and that's what you have all at your tables, this is a handout that you have today. So if you'll just jot down a couple of items, give you just a moment to, what's important to you. The things that we've talked about, is it supporting the local community? Is it providing the freshest possible ingredients to kids? Is it potentially providing something at a better value for our students?
So we discussed the why. Let's talk about how to get there. So I have again, it's on that handout, but we'll just kind of walk through this. As I mentioned before, choose your first step. You obviously need to take a look at where you're at in your program, what's available to you, what's your transportation system look like, et cetera, et cetera. We'll kind of walk through that. Seasonal produce buying guides, we have those available online. That'll tell you what produce is available in Colorado, when. That Colorado Market Maker, we'll talk about that in a little bit too. That's a great tool. But basically, this is what we did. We went through and took the steps that we knew that had to take place for planning purposes, and divided that up amongst the team. I basically took the facility and equipment demands. So assistant director took on food safety protocols and so forth and so forth. And that enabled us to work together to put together a plan as quick as possible, as efficient as possible. You need to decide where and when to menu your farm to school products. This part is actually a little bit more difficult, and definitely should include your key production personnel if you're from a school. You want to add or replace items without adding significant workload. This is huge, and this really depends on where you're at from a production standpoint. Are you a school that primarily deals with processed products, and you're just now diving into farm to school or scratch-made products? Are you a school that has been making scratch-made food for a while now, and your skill sets and your staff members are very good? It just really depends on your individual situation. You need to take a look at what's served, and or what you want to serve, and how can that first step impact your menu. Example, Are you purchasing whole carrots, or do you want to purchase whole carrots instead of baby carrots? And where are you going to purchase that from? Are you just going to purchase harvest of the month items? Rick made a reference to that earlier. Every month you choose a fresh produce item to feature. And if so, how are those items going to be menuyed? Also need to take a look at your production and processing procedures. How are you going to deliver what's served? That was a big step for us. Just this past year we went through a major remodel in our production and distribution process, mainly because we compartmentalized our production processes. And by doing so, we opened up the ability to have a produce kitchen, or phase one in our food hub concept, so that we can produce or process products and distribute within our district. So that's, and if you have a centralized kitchen, you're going to be, all of your food is going into one location and distributed from there. Jeremy referenced earlier that he didn't want to process his romaine lettuce in one kitchen and cut it and send it out because it would go bad. So you may bring it into an area, wash it, and send it all out to the schools without being cut.
So Brian, I'm just going to interject. So maybe you're not a school food service person, but if you're an ally or a parent or even a producer, these are kind of the questions that we have to answer as we start that program. So maybe, some of our staffs are a staff of one for a nutrition program, and so that's a lot to tackle for one person or two people. So having our producer and growing community, our parents and other community allies out there helping us speak into this process, because some of you will know a lot more about seasonality and shelf life than I ever will. And so I think that's a great way that it's a community effort, as are many things when it comes to the health of our children and the health of our communities. It really takes all of us. And so these are some great answers that I think, these questions that we're talking about really can apply if you're a producer, certainly if you're a school food service program, but also those other organizations that want to see this happen in their district. These are the questions that your food service director will be tackling.
And keep same kind of process as that critical thinking process, looking at production and processing, where and how much, et cetera, et cetera. What are your staffing needs? Again, like I mentioned before, what is your skill set of your staff? That's all important. You can also take a look at distribution. As I mentioned, you need some form of method of tracking, otherwise food will get lost in the shuffle. And as I mentioned before, again, before you begin, stakeholder meetings, get your feedback from your staff, and distribute that marketing. We talked a little bit earlier about Market Maker in a variety of the presentations today. It seems to be the hot topic. It's a wonderful tool. Basically, if you can look up several different farms or producers in the state of Colorado, in the region, and so forth, and really pick and choose who you'd like to use based off of what crops they grow, which is a key factor. So if you choose your first step and you say, hey, I want to cut my own carrots instead of buying baby carrots, do a search on there for carrots, see which producers can send you that crop, and then you can go about it. Technical difficulties.
Yeah, so we can just refer to the handout.
As far as understanding seasonality, that's also where the producers can come in handy. They can help you create a harvest schedule that they might have in their specific farm or ranch. If that's the case, then you know exactly how much or what they grow and how much you can purchase. And that's just part of developing those partnerships, and that comes in line with that pre-bid conference and so forth that was mentioned earlier. And then as time moves on, as your farm to school program grows, then you can take a look at what your budget needs are, or what you have capable of, or what's capable of using at the end of the year, and purchase something that we refer to as seconds. Seconds refer to products that don't hit the retail market, that may be at that is product that the farm would otherwise use themselves or send off for manufacturing somewhere. That's all product that we can use as a district to process into a variety of products. There's a handout online as well, as leading up to some of those crops that are available on a consistent basis that we can turn and use into low sodium diced tomatoes or crushed tomatoes, make salsa. Butternut squash you can buy in bulk when it's in season, nice and fresh, and pureed up and freeze. Buy your onions and celery when they're in season, dice it up, bag it, freeze it, use it all year round. So those are just things that you need to take into consideration.
So you had mentioned the crop calendar. So this is one of the things that I think we received from the Colorado Department of Agriculture at one time. That's a great resource for knowing what is grown in Colorado when. Great calendar there. And then there's also some calendars that local farms will provide us. And we put an example of that online as well. Is this one of yours, Jeremy?
Yeah, this is an example of the harvest schedule.
Do you want to tell us what this is, Jim?
So each farm, you saw the crop calendar. Well, maybe the farms I deal with don't grow beets or cantaloupe. So each farm that we have connected with, you will find that your local farms have their own crop calendar of what they're growing. And so this helps us as we look at that plan, how that fits into our menu. So if we want to, if harvest of the month is something that they're growing, then that helps us. We can make that connection and say, oh, well, we can get watermelon from, these 3 farms to serve our schools. And so having those local crop calendars has been very helpful for us to manage the process and really maximize our local produce because we understand when they harvest. Now, again, like I always say, God's the ultimate farmer. And so those are kind of proposed dates, and we understand the flexibility that needs to happen. Sometimes things are early, sometimes things are late. And so, but that has been a great tool for us. And so we try and gather those from all the farms that we work with as we approach our yearly plan for Farm to School.
So what you could do with this tool is you could take this tool and provide this to your local farm and say, this is something that Jeremy gets in Greeley. This is something that you could do for our school district, just as an example. Yeah, the first one. Which one was that, right? Oh, the second.
Okay, so these are just some of the benefits of the second run produce. It's obviously cheaper to purchase than a retail product, even from a wholesale standpoint. It's more money for growers because it's a product that they would have to send out in bulk for manufacturing or use themselves, or in some cases even throw away, which would be terribly unfortunate. It will drastically reduce your sodium and sugar levels in your food. Instead of buying canned products, canned peaches, canned tomatoes, things like that. Because it's processed, it has an incredible amount of sodium and sugar. Increase your commodity purchase value. If you're spending less money on food and purchasing these seconds, that's more money that you typically have for brown box commodities, rather than buying those pre-fab processed products. Marketability and education. That just lends itself to same concept as urban farms. Bringing a fresh product in. Peaches don't come from a can, regardless of what the song says. They come from a tree. So here's some examples of some price layouts. Dollars and cents. Average price for a number 10 can, $4. It can cost you $2.95 in seconds. You add a little bit of labor to that, sure, but that labor is typically already there. So again, it's part of the training processes that you need to go through. And then the second page just illustrates some examples of what you can do with some of the produce. And a lot of that is common sense. That's, as I was looking at the new levels for sodium in that proposal, I noticed that there's definitely going to be some items that we have to adjust. We have to start making our own tomato sauce. We can't afford to use these diced products anymore because it's just not going to, it's going to take up all of our sodium usage in our food. So we have a choice. We can either A, use these diced items or use this canned product and then not add salt or season anything else for the rest of the day because there's salt in bread, there's salt in everything we serve. Or B, start using fresh products to make these sauces, like a nice pomodoro with fresh basil and so forth. And then we can afford to use that salt elsewhere, like to season the chicken breast or something like that. So it's a conscious choice and serving what's good to the kids. We do have plenty of recipes accessible for knowing what to do with some of these fresh products, how to process it and so forth, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But all the recipes should be available online.
All right, let's talk about food safety, a big topic. Is farm-to-school produce safe? I think that's a question that we should all ask ourselves. It's important that we keep our food system safe. And as a food service director, I'm used to buying from large companies who buy from other large companies who have great HACCP plans. They probably have people in charge of that or a group of people. And so transitioning from that to small farms or medium farms that are family-run that don't have those resources can be challenging for both the grower and for the nutrition service director. So is it safe? I think let's ask ourselves these questions. This was kind of what I had to think about when we stepped into farm to school. So what do you think is safer, produce that has traveled 50 miles or 1,500 miles? Now certainly they could both be the same level of safeness, but I just think the more things travel, there's more potential for things to happen to it. Certainly it's not as nutrient dense either. Produce that has been handled by 3 to 4 companies or by 1 company. Produce purchased from a farm I've had the opportunity to personally inspect, or from a farm I've never heard of. Again, not saying that other produce isn't safe. I just think we need to be common sense about it. I think as I begin to explore those questions, to me, farm to school, buying something local that's at my back door, was inherently as safe, if not safer, than produce I was buying from other places. However, we have to have evidence of safe practices from our growers to say that we have done our due diligence as directors and food service operators to ensure food safety. So there's a couple of nationally recognized standards or credentials. I want to reference to our case study before I move to that. This talks about the safety of local food, and this was one of the case studies that Colorado Farm to School did. Well, that's a good one too. So this one's geared towards just directors, and so this will give you some ideas from hosting growers meetings where you can get together, and I love Krista's example today. I think that's brilliant that she brought them in and said, here's the proposal that I have. How does that play out for you at the farm? How are you going to test your water safety? I think that's a great practical application. Requiring documentation, that's part of our bid process in northern Colorado. We have to show evidence of a HACCP plan. Farm visits are huge. I think it's great to go visit your farms and make sure that the HACCP plans that are given to you are actually playing out. Start the process early. Farm to school doesn't start in June, it starts now. Farmers are gearing up. They've already, as one farmer told me, when everybody else is making their Christmas list, I'm making my seed list of what I'm going to get. So they're in it now, so we've got to be starting that process early. And it really starts, food safety starts from the time you get those seeds and it's time to plant them. It starts then, it doesn't start just at harvest. Offer assistance. So if you have some food service experience or you're a district that has a HACCP plan in place, I have worked with some growers that have found it beneficial for me to just give them a copy of my HACCP plan. A lot of it is geared towards schools, but some of those same principles apply, and so being able to cut and paste that into their world has helped them. And then you have to review your HACCP plan. Have that reviewed by your peers. As food service directors, be willing to assist your small growers with that. And remember that there aren't a whole lot of fields out there that are at 41 degrees. Most of our fields, well maybe at night, but during the day, I don't see a lot of refrigerated fields. And so sometimes we have put up barriers as schools where we've had these restrictions for how we have to receive produce. So as a food service director, I had to take a hard look at, what is the regulation versus the barriers that maybe I've put in place of that, and what can we do and still feel safe about it. Okay, well anyway, you can take a look on their website, and it's a little 3-page article about food safety in farm to school. That's the one. Now let's talk about some of the benchmarks that are out there. You've probably heard of GAP and GIP. Those are a couple of nationally recognized standards through USDA federal and state audits. So GAP certification is verification of practices on the farm that minimize microbial contamination and the production of fresh fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts. So the audit consists basically of 3 sections of the USDA federal and state audit checklist. So there's general questions, a farm review, and field harvest or field packing. So it really, addresses food safety, but also environmental impact and sustainability. And then there's GIP, good handling practices. GIP certification is verification of practices in the handling and packing operation that minimizes microbial contamination and the handling of fresh fruits, vegetables, and tree nuts. And so again, they follow that federal and state audit checklist, and the questions they address are some general questions about the farm, the house packing facility, and then they look at storage and transportation as well. So I want to show you a good common sense approach to that. So GIP and GAP, my goodness, if you look at those audits, they're thick, they're very comprehensive. Some of those I would not even, if I went, just strolled out to a farm with my GAP protocol and my GIP protocol and tried to evaluate some of those, I am not a scientist. I don't have some of the tools that they need to do that. So try and take a common sense approach. I think it's a great tool to build your own assessment from if you're a director. If you're a grower, basing your HACCP plan around some of those, I think it's a great certification to obtain. And if you have the means to do that, I would encourage you to do that, because that really eliminates a lot of barriers for growers. But District 11 has a great tool up here where they have used modified GIP and GAP things from those audits to really develop their own tools. So I wanted.
Yeah, and basically in our planning conference that we had with producers, we sat down with them and said, what's important to you? And how is this working for farms? What's realistic? Because when we started talking about GAP and GIP, their eyes rolled in the back of their heads, and they just didn't want to talk about that. What we have found in working with local farms is that they're people too, and they want to make it as streamlined and easy as possible. And so they want to serve us, but they don't want to jump through a bunch of hoops to do it, because that raises their costs and complexity. So in order to make that happen, let's try and cut to the chase so that we have a win-win, so that it works for both parties. And so that's how this modified process that Jeremy just talked about came about, is when we were sitting down with the farms and learning what they thought they could do. We kind of came to a middle-of-the-road collaboration to where we know what's non-negotiable for us as far as food safety goes. We know what's important when it comes to our kitchens, and we're responsible for that product from the time it comes in the back door until the time it's served. And that whole flow of the food is called the hazard analysis, critical control points, and that's our responsibility. But what happens to that product before it gets to our back door, well, we're responsible for that too. And so we wanted to make sure that we had a good system in place. And I think Krista talked to us about some great systems that she has done, sounds like very similar to this, in being able to come up with a win-win. That collaborative process to say, well, what can you do? And what's a non-negotiable line for us? And so we came up with this good agriculture, good handling practices, and audit certification program for those who want to sell fresh produce to School District 11. Working with the Arkansas Valley Organic Growers Association, getting their feedback and input on this, knowing what is required of us as far as food safety, we put this together. And it's basically an introduction, a couple of pages, and then it goes into food safety program and traceability, worker hygiene and health, water and sewage, manure and soils, animal access and pest control, field sanitation and harvesting, equipment, facility storage, packing facility, ice and refrigeration, transportation. So if you think of all those areas that we just went through, that is the flow of food on a farm and in a packaging facility. And so we wanted to make sure that as we were looking at those gap and GIP audits, we basically just went through as a team and said, okay, this is really important to us, this is negotiable. And so basically what this represents is what's really important to us. So with this particular document, this is kind of a pass-fail, that they either have all these things and can do business with us, or they miss one and have to go back and we talk about it and we say, well, what does this really mean? And what does this look like on your farm? And then at that point we decide, well, no, you need to go back and fix that, and this is what it needs to look like. Or we say, well, no, you're really doing that process for us. You really meet that. That's a check in the wrong box, and we just fix that. So it's really that collaboration with farms at this point, where we're working as partners to be able to provide great food to our kids.
I think it's a great tool to build off of. And so that is on the website for you to look at, or for $19.95 plus shipping and handling. I'm sure Rick would send you 2 of them that you can manipulate. Maybe even 3. So, I love, it's 10 steps, 10 areas that we look at. And so, think about how that plays out for your district. A couple other items, just want to reference real quick. There was another food safety inspection form, just to give you an idea of something that's a little different.
Sorry.
All right. I'm not firing you. There, I think that one.
This one right here.
I believe so. I think this is a U.S. Foods one. So if, maybe Cisco's your vendor, other vendors, I know that they have food safety checklist inspection forms that they use. Hook up with some of those if you're developing your checklist. I think GAP and GIP are certainly great tools, but also your other vendors who deal with produce, so Federal, Fresh Pack, U.S. Foods, Andrews, whoever. They also, a lot of them go out and inspect fields of where produce that they're buying, and so they might be a good resource for you as well to kind of use some of their questions and things that they look at.
And that reminds me, that's one of the reasons why we came up with this modified GAP program, is that, at first, the GAP and GIP process, there's a cost to local farms to be able to do that. Some of our small family farms don't want to do that or can't afford to do that. We still want to work with them to support our local community. So with that spirit of wanting to serve, wanting to work with them, we came up with this process to where possibly it's someone on my management team who has been trained in Serve Safe and is able to understand food safety, where we go out and do this process in the small family farm. Or perhaps we hire someone outside the organization to go do that for us, such as someone maybe from the local extension service who understands food safety, or we possibly hire an Andy from Slow Foods, or a Julia from RealFood Colorado, someone who can kind of be a third party to go out and help us with that process. Because ultimately, I'm responsible for what I buy and what I serve. And so I want to make sure that that product is safe, number one. That's the minimum threshold that it has to meet, safe. And then I want to make sure it's a great product.
So the last couple bullet points there involving your local health department and school gardens. I did include it as an SOP, a standard operating procedure on washing on farm to school fruits and vegetables. So that you'll see that on the website as well. And it's not very much different from my regular SOP for fruits and vegetables. Handling farm to school produce and handling produce not from a farm is not a whole lot of difference there. So, you have to use your common sense. Watermelons are not potentially hazardous until you cut them. So do I need to absolutely have to die on a sword, receive watermelons at 41 degrees or below? You do not. Maybe there's some differences in your local health department, but I would argue that. That is not an absolute. If it's cut watermelon, then yes, you do need to receive that. It's potentially hazardous food. So, make sure you have that clearly stated in your plan, that you understand what you are receiving and what you're not. There are some things that are not negotiable. School gardens, I thank you, Andy, and Slow Food and DPS. They pioneered through that to figure out how to buy produce from their school gardens, which was a great fundraiser for the school. It helps fund their education initiatives. Again, kids don't have to go sell cookie dough. But also, the excitement of serving produce that was grown at that school in the cafeteria is amazing to me. We've seen this at 2 of our schools that Jenna Raymond, our wellness specialist, has worked with this year. And one of them was John Evans Middle School, and they were so excited the day that we brought in their harvest that we paid them for so that they can continue to their school garden and serve that on their salad bar. The excitement from that and the kudos, the principal was excited, all the students, it helps increase participation. So I don't think you can say enough about the benefits of school gardens. There are some tools, so thank you to DPS, that's what I love about this type of community is they're very sharing with their resources. They provided us with their SOP and standards for operating that. We tweaked that to be applicable to District 6, and then we took that to our health department and got their blessing upon that. So be partners with your health department. I love Weld County Health Department. Andrew's here. Be sure and tell them I said that. But they are your partner, and they will help keep you out of trouble and help keep your food safe. And so involve them in that process, whether it's for farm to school or school gardens. Food safety is accomplishable. We do that all the time. We serve, thousands and thousands of meals per day. A lot of school districts are here. We can do the same. We can apply those same stringent standards to farm to school produce, but still make it livable for our growers. We just need to use some common sense about it.
Yeah, and those great tools that Jeremy just mentioned from Slow Food Denver are on the website. We'll talk about those in a little more depth in a moment. So this is kind of the end of the food safety section. Did we kind of help break down some of those barriers for you? Are there still questions or concerns that you have about food safety? Questions?
I also just realized that they kind of cut me short on my processes because they know I could talk about processes all day long. And I was trying to rush through a lot of that, but they just wanted me to stop so they can keep on talking. You guys are talkers. So how about processes? Anything else on processes? How do you actually go about making all this happen? I'm going to get into one specific instance to walk you through what we've done with one particular product, moving from scratch or from process to scratch, and how we can further develop that to make it a farm to school item, also by bringing in dried beans from a local source. But anything else?
Questions about either processes or about food safety? Anybody awake? Get up and do jumping jacks. Okay, so the other stumbling block that I found when I was doing farm to school was the procurement process. And as we got to looking at this and really digging into it, it's not rocket science. It's not enough to be a hurdle. And when I learned that, I was so relieved. And so, yes, I think that everything that Jan and Jane went through are the processes that we need to follow. But that very first one addresses most of our needs in this room, and that is the small purchase threshold. And each of our school districts have different small purchase thresholds. But if you think about the fact that the federal procurement threshold was $100,000 for small purchases, the federal is $150,000. Our school district goes with the 100, and that's a lot of fresh produce that I can buy. So I can do a bid for carrots, and really the small purchase threshold means that I just need to get 3 quotes, and I can do that. I can do that quite easily by just having a quote sheet that I put together in a Word document and fax that to the farms and get their quotes, have them fax that back to me, and I can make a decision that afternoon. And one of the things that when I sat down with our procurement director and talked through this process with her, she said, there's some other contractual terms that we require as a district, but once we know who we're going to purchase from based on the price, then we have this pre-agreed contract with potential vendors who could sell to us, and it's good to go. So it really can be a very easy process. And I know that there's a Colorado bid template that was mentioned today that's coming out that's going to help some of the larger districts with their purchasing. But I guess let's not make it more complicated than it needs to be. It can be a pretty brain damaging process if we let it. One of the pieces about procurement, though, is having a good communication plan, and a piece of that is just breaking down those barriers with the growers, the local growers, to sit down with them and talk about what that means and what can you grow this year, and how does the seasons look, and what does the Farmer's Almanac say? Having those discussions and that dialogue with them to come up with a plan that's collaborative in nature, and then also having an internal plan of when that produce comes in and how are we going to make that work in our own school district. And I think this is an example here that Jeremy has put together for Greeley District. Do you want to mention that?
So if everybody
Turn your head like this, and you'll see. So we have to have internal and external communication of our plan. And so Kara, wave your hand over there, is my dietitian who puts this all together. So we get our bids back, we're excited, we have farm to school produce to buy. Oh my goodness, how do we put that on the menu? So we map out, how many pounds of produce we're going to need. If it's, corn on the cob and we need 1,000 pounds, we map that out internally so that we understand that we are buying corn on the cob in August, September, and October. It's going to be on the menu as a half a piece of corn on the cob. So internally, we understand that process. Then we also communicate out externally to our vendors who we've awarded that to, and give them an idea of when that is on the menu, that it really is on August 28th, and then a month later, and then a month later. And so they can understand and prepare for their harvest and their production schedule. That's the beautiful thing about schools is, I don't think there's any school in here that probably doesn't operate on a cycle menu. So if it happened today and you're on a 4-week cycle menu, guess what? Money, hands down, 4 weeks from now, I'm going to serve that same thing. So it makes it easy once you're in there to do that. And so that communication piece is huge. And it's a challenge because, we're food service directors, we're here during the day and at a desk. Growers are not at a desk. They're generally out in the field taking care of their farms, and so, it's hard for us to connect sometimes. So really having this, and then good communication when things happen. We lose crops. Maybe the crop is early. Can you take it this week? Is that going to be a problem? Some of that can be how I menu it. Do I menu specifically this fruit or this vegetable? Or do I have that flexibility because I've put fresh fruit or just fresh vegetable on my menus? Or I have a salad bar where I can have a variety. So that communication is huge. Maybe there's some things that you didn't bid, but you have an opportunity, and we've talked about seconds. We love it when growers come to us and say, hey, I have surplus, or this delivery didn't happen, here's the deal we can make for you. Those are a great opportunity for us to even expand our plan from what we originally talked about.
So in talking about the bid process, one of the things that we have bid out, and we've done this for several years now, is grass-finished, all-natural, hormone-free, antibiotic-free beef. And so this is an example of a contract from an RFP. So all the language in here comes from the RFP that was done when we bid this out. And so this is a tool that's online that you can utilize that was put together by our procurement department, and it helps greatly. And so this is, talks about what's expected in that business partnership that we have with Ranch Foods Direct.
All right, so I get to talk about process, finally.
Any questions about procurement, purchasing?
Does organic certification have any advantage for the producer?
Does organic certification have any advantage for the producer? My response would be if I am the buyer, then yes. If I'm the buyer and organic certification is in my specification of food, then yes, I would require that.
Is it frequently?
Because of cost, usually not. More often not than yes.
I think it helps you more with food safety because to become certified organic helps you check off some of the food safety boxes. But in our bid for Northern Colorado, we do not bid organic. However, we have the benefit of having a number of organic farms up there, and so that's always a bonus to have that. But I think that's probably where it helps you more is just the food safety aspect.
Okay. So like I mentioned, to talk about specifics on how to go about doing this. Again, recipes are available online. Seasonality, we have the crop calendar and so forth. Jeremy already mentioned the flexibility. You need to be flexible to God's creations, those crops out there. They may or may not be there for you, so you need that backup plan or a backup seed plan. But to walk you through kind of the process, and I wish there were still some producers here, or more producers here to kind of show them, we just can't make split decisions like this and that. Everything we do requires a process. So for instance, we have the Good Food Project in District 11, which means that we want to get rid of all processed foods by January 12th. This is one of the steps we took. Last year with our bean burritos, we used to purchase a prefab product wrapped in plastic and so forth that would basically come out of a box onto a sheet pan and into the oven, plastic and all. And right? So it was one of those products where we identified that, hey, we need to change this. We don't want to use this product anymore. How do we go about doing that? But first, you identify the reasons for change. Number one is a highly processed item. Number two, the yuck, right? Baking it in a plastic bag. And number three, the ingredient list was astronomical. It wasn't a very clean label. A bunch of chemical binders and so forth to keep the cost down because it was a processed product. So again, identify potential issues with making this change. Number one, the product will look different. It's not going to be baked in a plastic bag. We've already identified that, but we want to change that. So it will look different, number one. We need to train staff and look at what's required to make this product and possibly go through some staff training. We knew that anytime you make a change or anytime you go to scratch cooking, consistency is always an issue. You need to identify who's going to make it the most consistent product, or make sure you have the same product in this school and that school and so forth. And then how do you manage that change? So the product changes for this specific item. We went from a processed product at a white tortilla. We went from a white tortilla to a whole grain. We created a natural bean and cheese filling without chemical binders, using seasonings and enchilada sauce that we made from scratch. We're currently using canned pinto beans, but the next step will be to use pinto beans from down in Pueblo, dried pinto beans, and that'll probably happen next year. Packaging, we knew it was going to be different. Enhanced flavor profile, because it doesn't have all that junk, or we're using natural ingredients. We knew the flavor was going to change slightly, but become better. And we knew the labor involved would increase. But we also knew by doing some studies that the labor was already there. Like I mentioned before, it's budgeted for. It's not going anywhere. It's just a reallocation, as Jeremy keeps mentioning. So it's again, building up your staff skill sets in order to make all this happen. Impact, increased labor, or the perception of increased labor. Again, it really depends on the skill sets of your team. Increased commodity usage. At the time when we made this change, we had a bunch of pinto beans in our warehouse from commodities years before, and we ended up using that product. Lower food cost. Anytime you go to scratch cooking, I'd say 98% of the time it's going to cost you less. Of course, it depends on which products you purchase and so forth. Customer perception. Because it looks different, it's a different item, so what are the customers going to think? And then we had to take a look at what's needed. What are the equipment needs to go from prefab to scratch? Looking at the processes, and just from experience, knew that immersion blender would help. tilting skillets, hotel pans, etc. And at that time, we had all that equipment, so no purchases were needed. Staff training, it just so happens that at that time, we had already started making our own sauces from scratch. We were making our own enchilada sauce. That was one of the first changes we made to go into scratch. They needed to know the puree technique, how to use an immersion blender and what to look for. And again, they were doing that already with our mac and cheese sauce. Temperature control and HACCP. Identifying those critical control points, we were already doing that, so no training needed. So really, when it came down to it, we only had the rolling procedure to go over and the heating procedure for the burrito, because that was changed slightly. So not too bad, actually. So implementation. So we identified what changes needed to take place. We identified some of the critical factors to implement those. So how do we further do that? We started with commodity canned beans, like I mentioned, because we had it in inventory. The next step would be to go to farm to school, which will start next year. Staff training, increase those skill sets and so forth. We identified we needed to go over the rolling procedure, the heating procedures, and whatnot. So we host our own boot camp over the summer, and that was when we took advantage of training our folks on how to make it and roll it, how to bake it, how to serve it to the kids, et cetera, et cetera. So we went over all those procedures, and we were ready to go before the semester started. And this is just one recipe, so I told you I could talk about this all day long. But I won't. So the next steps from there for us, menu integration. Okay, so when are we going to menu it? How often are we going to menu it? That all ties into play with how much inventory we have to use. What does the production week look like? How skilled are the production folks? What kind of equipment are we using to make all this? Is that equipment free, or is it being used by other items, et cetera, et cetera? And then we just have to look at doing the recipe analysis, make sure it meets the components and whatnot, go over the distribution information. Again, market those item changes before you actually make the change, so you get credit for that change. And then get the feedback from the students. We spend a lot of our time on a weekly basis just going to schools and monitoring some of these changes and going back to scratch and getting the kids' feedback. What can we make better, et cetera, et cetera. And that's just as important as anything else.
There goes the tractor. Okay, so let me talk to you. We have started making our own burritos in District 6, and I got an opportunity to step into that production last week, and I helped with about 2,000 of the 8,700 they needed to make. And I tried to roll, but I noticed Chef Darcy kind of put me on the scooping pretty quick after that. So I think it really is a talent, a skill you have to develop. So, but a half a serving, a half a cup, I think, is a serving size. And of canned pinto beans is hundreds of milligrams of sodium. When we start using dry local pinto beans that we're cooking, it's 6 milligrams of sodium. So, want an answer to your sodium problem? Farm to school is your answer. I think it's a big piece of that. So does labor need to increase? If it's burritos, yes. It is much more labor intensive to make a burrito or 8,700 burritos than it is to open those boxes. But sometimes it doesn't need to increase. So I think, does it need to increase? Depends is the answer. Sometimes you can absorb that into the workday, or really just making those one-time investments in some equipment can really help save labor or not increase your labor to do that. And sometimes it can make sense, and it can make sense, as in dollars, to centralize some processing efforts. Do not try, well, I don't know, maybe you can do this. We tried to centralize, we make lettuce or lettuce mix kits, and so we have cabbage, shredded red cabbage, baby spinach, and romaine. And so, it made sense. We're gonna buy heads of romaine from a local farm. We'll chop it up at our central production kitchen and have that all ready for them. We send it out with the lettuce and the cabbage, and it's a little kit, and they can mix it. Well, let me tell you, that beautiful lettuce I bought from the farm was brown and nasty before we could get it out the door, because we were kind of beating it to death instead of chopping it. We didn't have the right equipment. It was hard to get the moisture out of it. So for us, it made sense for romaine needs to be something that's done on site. Other things, other hardier vegetables, peppers, onions, things that maybe we needed to chop those for fajitas, that can be done at a central location. So you really have to look at that, be strategic about when it makes sense to centralize the chopping of that. And I know Boulder Schools does some great work for their salad bars, where they have some good systems in place that they're doing that at some central kitchens throughout their district and then shipping that out. But other things have to be done on site. Community partners, we talked, I think earlier today I told you about my little soccer team, the soccer shuckers I call them, that came and shucked my corn. That saved me $2 a dozen to have them shuck it. Well, it didn't save me because I paid them, but it was nice to be able to connect with my community. So they came to my central production kitchen. Of course, since they're in my area, I took the opportunity to educate them as to what they were seeing here. And then when we were done, I said, so does that seem like a lot of corn to you? And they thought, oh yeah, that's a lot of corn. It was 2,000 years, I think. I said, that is not enough corn to feed our middle schools. It's enough corn to feed our middle schools for one day. And so it really opens their eyes to the system that's around them and hopefully help connect them to their food a little better. Also, youth farmer markets are another great community partnership that, I've offered that to ours, that we can provide some equipment or some resources for that. So connect with your community through this. Training is key. Brian touched on that. I think we all probably know how to chop romaine lettuce for our salad at home, but have you tried to chop it for 700 people or 10,000 people? It's a little harder, and you need to be quick about it. You don't have all day to get it done because that's just one piece of the meal that you're producing. So we have, the culinary boot camps have been a great tool to use. Ours, we're awarded a Live Well one, and now we're currently developing an internal boot camp because we have staff turnover. We know Live Well can't educate every employee in the state, and so we want to be able to do that internally. District 11 and DPS also have some great models for boot camps, and they've provided on their learning objectives, they've provided their agenda. And it's a great mix of stuff that's in the classroom, talking theory, talking through processes, and then really being hands-on in the kitchen.
Sorry, Jeremy. That takes a lot of planning ahead of time. You have to know what you want to focus on for the following year before you even think about your training plan for the summer, which is when we conduct our boot camp. So when we take a look at our boot camp, we already know that, okay, these are the steps we want to take for 2012, 13, etc.
Very good. We also used YouTube. God bless YouTube. When we started buying heads of romaine versus bagged romaine, we actually found a how to cut romaine lettuce the best way video. And it was kind of corny, but it got the point across. And so, those are great tools. And so we showed that in all managers meeting. They, in turn, can take that back to their school. You always have to remind them that it is from a farm. And so when I get the calls that there was dirt on my lettuce, yes, yay! It came from a farm. There was a worm. Yes! That can't count as protein, so take it out. But yes, we were so glad that there was a worm in your lettuce. So those calls have quit. That first year, honestly, I think Kara can attest to this. If we heard one more time that the lettuce had sand in it or it was dirty and I had to wash it 3 times, fantastic. We're glad to hear it. So we don't get those calls anymore. I think they finally figure they just need to wash it. So partner with other school districts, maybe coming together on that, figuring out some systems. Maybe you have some neighboring school districts and you have some facilities or some talented staff that can process this part and then, share it with another school district. I think that's a great way to work together. Let's talk about equipment and supplies. So, it can be simple things. When we started doing heads of romaine, we needed to buy salad spinners. We could not get the water out of that lettuce sufficiently enough that, they had chopped it and then maybe they put it in their fridge waiting for lunch and it would kind of ice up. And so we would give them, they're like 5-gallon pickle buckets with a big spinner on top. You set it down your sink and you're good to go. Sinks with agitators, as we look to do some central processing of fruits and vegetables, we're looking at some larger scale equipment, whether it's pillars or these wonderful sinks that agitate the water and wash the potatoes for you. They're magic sinks.
Right.
Immersion blenders are another great tool.
And in that thinking process or that planning phase, you definitely want to look at your facility, you want to look at what you have available to you in that specific kitchen, wherever you're going to host its production, as well as others. What can I pull from this kitchen to put in here, and so forth. And we went through this extensive process in our food hub idea in order to develop our phase 1, 2, and 3. And we mapped everything out. We talked to our facilities crew. We talked with the electricians, et cetera, plumbers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How are we going to get to this point, to that point, and so forth, and how much it's going to cost us.
So talk us through the model. So in District 11, they have some base kitchens, and so one of their bases is going to be focused on produce. Other kitchens do this in each kitchen, other school districts, or we have a central production facility. So there's lots of ways this plays out in districts.
So this is actually our phase 1. The phase, or the current model, the current kitchen, prior to this, didn't have any sinks to wash the produce, didn't have any equipment to process, no food processors, no mixers, no this or that that's really needed. And we had to also keep in mind that at the same time that all this production is going on for our entire district from a produce standpoint, we also have a high school to take care of. So we needed kind of somewhat of a separation as, to divide the work amongst the crew and not cross-contaminate. So that's pretty much what that layout helped us accomplish. And it also let us know what we would need to purchase and if we could fit those purchases.
So
storage. Storage, that was a problem we came across. When you look at storage, or when you're looking at your own farm to school program, and as you grow that specific program, you need to look at the cubic feet of storage. A box of fresh romaine off the farm is different from a 30-pound box of cut lettuce. I mean, it takes up more space and so forth, and you're going to need more space to accommodate that. You also need to take a look at your ethylene gas in your storage, and where do you store the products? Do you want your lettuce all the way in the back in the cooler where it's coldest? No, because it'll probably freeze. You want that up front. You want your heartier vegetables that'll last longer in the back area. So those are all things you need to take into consideration. Storage is huge. That's one of the things that our grant is going to help us supply, is a larger cooler for our food hub program, because we found that's just essential.
So in talking about storage, there's actually some fruits and vegetables that will ripen other fruits and vegetables. It's called ethylene gas, and some fruits and vegetables give off ethylene gas. Other fruits and vegetables take in ethylene gas. And so we've put this tool online to help you know which are which, so that you can keep them separate from each other, and it'll actually make your produce last longer. You can use this at home too.
Distribution we've touched on a little bit already. Some things that will make sense to do at a central location or at a base kitchen, other times it will not. And then your ordering system, sometimes that can depend how you're set up. We have centralized delivery, so everything is delivered to us first, and then we make that decision about processing it. And then some things are just a pass through our warehouse. They come to our warehouse, they're out to the schools, and they take it from there. And then District 11 has provided an example of their ordering system from elementaries to their base kitchen.
This is a sample of what we call a cheat sheet. This tells all of our kitchen managers what products come from where and for what entree. So in our district, we have a produce kitchen, we have 2 entree kitchens, and we have 1 bakery. And those locations produce all the food for all of our schools, all of our 64 sites. For us, distribution is rather complicated. So we needed a way to define that, what comes from where, when, etc. When is it produced? When is it distributed? When do you need to order it, and so forth. So we actually have an automation system, an order automation system, where all of our kitchen managers input their orders by serving. The system collects all that data, and and then provides production reports, delivery reports, U.S. food order guides, produce order guides, and so forth. And that we saw was necessary because we didn't want one kitchen manager responsible for going through 64 menus and trying to collect all this data by themselves. So that's just what we found that we had to use in order to make that system work.
Okay, let's talk about marketing. So it doesn't do any good. Oh, don't tell me you're going to die now. It doesn't do any good to go through all of this exercise of getting good food to the plate if they don't take advantage of it. And so marketing is all about helping communicate the message of what we're doing and why. And with marketing, one of the first steps is to identify our stakeholders and who are we targeting with what message. And so, we want to, I talked about the Board of Education. The Board of Education, ultimately hires you and fires you. And so we want to make sure that they know what we're doing and that they're supportive. And so in the process, constantly communicating with them and letting them know what we're doing. And, going to school boards and catering a school board dinner once in a while. Is a great way to interact with them. When you do a garden opening or when you start a new partnership with a local farm, involve them so that they understand what's happening and why you're doing it. Also, we found that having the superintendent on board is a pretty key action there, as well as the CFO, the person who is signing our paychecks, having principals and teachers on board. Having our food and nutrition services staff understand why they should care is incredibly important. So getting all of your stakeholders identified and then doing something to get them on board with the decision is critical. That food and nutrition services staff, just show them Food Inc. for a couple of hours and they will immediately change how they think about the food system. And then it's doing things like that to help them understand why they should care and why we're making these changes. And that goes for having other parents and other community members on board as well. I mentioned our Farm to School task force that's helping us with progressing with Farm to School and some of the changes that we're making in our Colorado Springs school districts. But getting parents on board, having communication systems to let them know what we're doing and why, also very important. And that same goes for students. Ultimately, it's the students who are going to decide whether or not they consume that meal. Even if they go through the serving line, they may toss the whole tray. We're not seeing a whole lot of that. We're seeing a little bit of change as in our participation levels as we make these changes towards good food. As I mentioned, we've been doing this for several years now. This year was our biggest change where we completely 86 chicken nuggets from our menu, and we limited pizza, and we took nachos off our menu. And Brian mentioned that goal of removing highly processed foods from our menus by January 2012. It's January 2012, and we're there. We're there as much as we can get there. There's still some little things such as partially hydrogenated oils that show up in tortillas every once in a while. But we've gone as far as we can go at this point, and we can say that we're there. And so in doing that, you have to get people on board. The local health department, I talked about that this morning. We have a great relationship with their health department, and again, they understand what we're doing, and we involve them in some of the decisions that we're making. The Know Your Food, Know Your Farmer is a great promotional avenue for us to engage with the community. Can you bring that Palisade Peach one up? So this summer, during the Palisade Peach Festival, my family and I were over in Palisade, and we were driving through the orchards and just, admiring the beauty of the countryside in Palisade. And we stopped at this one local orchard and talked to one of the growers, one of the farmers, and talked about peaches and where can I buy some peaches for my family. And I was looking for organic peaches, and she said, well, you have to go talk to Ellen over at Palisade Peach Company. So I went over and talked to Ellen at Palisade Peach Company, which is about 5 miles away, and you know, driving through the orchards, finally found this great peach orchard, small family orchard, and tasted. She, you know, has 3 peaches in her hand that she just picked from a tree because she was out in the orchard when I got there, and said, "Here, try these." And I tasted, you know, a peach that had been picked from a tree, you know, not more than 15 minutes before I ate it. And, you know, the juice was running down my arm. It was like you're watching a Carl's Jr. commercial, but it was in heaven. It was eating a peach that had been just picked, and it was organic. It was just wonderful. And so I said, "Ellen, how can I get these on my school lunch menu?" And she, you know, we started talking about distribution channels, and you know, she's just a small grower. She doesn't do a whole lot, but she could have enough peaches to where I could, you know, menu peaches one day and serve 11,000 peaches, you know, all at once. And she said, "Well, you know, I distribute through this company, and I distribute through this company," and it turned out that she had distributed through Fresh Pack, which is one of the options that we have, you know, through our commodity produce program. And I was actually able to use commodity Department of Defense dollars to buy these incredible peaches. We put this sign together and marketed the heck out of it. You know, this particular peach cost about 12% more than what the conventionally grown one does. And that's about my limit of how much I'll spend on something like this. Because when I do something like this, I make a big deal out of it. As you can see from this sign, we put up in the schools. We did a robocall to the houses in our school district. We did an mass email to all the teachers in the district. My participation went through the roof on this one day, more than offset the 12% that I paid in addition for this organic, locally grown peach. You know, so this is just an example, a different way to look at this, of how we can afford to do this, because I know that cost is important to all of us, and this is one way that we can make that happen. The marketing Harvest of the Month is a great program that the school districts in Colorado have collaborated on. There's a link on the website here, as well as the order forms. Facebook, you know, Facebook is a great way to market. If you're a Facebook person, become a friend of ours. You go to just Google, or not, I'm sorry, just search D11 Good Food Project on Facebook, and you can become a friend. I think we have about almost 300 people who are staying on top of what we're doing with good food. It's the D11 Good Food Project. I can take a picture on my phone and upload it to Facebook by the time I get back to my office of one of the great lunches that we're serving kids these days. And last but not least is School Gardens. School Gardens is a great way to serve locally grown fresh produce right from our own backyard. This is a picture of Galileo, where we put a 41-foot geodesic dome greenhouse that we were able to purchase with grants, and that is freshly grown lettuce that we are actually serving in the D11 meal programs. So, you know, so salad bars is a great way to be able to serve the freshly grown produce. Pictures of what it looks like. It's pretty easy to do.
So introducing fresh fruits and vegetables into your salad bar is the easiest thing to do, like Rick said, and that may be your first step in a farm-to-school program. Maybe it's buying those fresh peaches and introducing them, or cucumbers, or tomatoes, or so forth. And then when you get more advanced and to start taking a serious look at your labor, that's when you can start looking at your recipes, composed salads, pound salads, things that have many ingredients, and incorporated dressing, and so forth and so forth.
There's also recipes. Quite a few of Chef Brian's recipes are on the website of how to use this locally grown fresh produce. You want to talk about repurposing?
Sure. Repurposing is one of those techniques that the health department allows, as long as you cook the product or reuse it in a different way, or a combination of both. For instance, you can take applesauce or peaches that are on your salad bar, transport those back to your kitchen, your main hub or whatever, once service is over, and convert that into a peach chutney, or use the applesauce in a cake instead of adding a fat like margarine or oil. So again, as long as you bake it or cook it in some way, bring the temperature to 165, then you can use that product. You don't have to throw it away.
So we were going to have T-shirts made for you all today that said salad bars, developing stronger immune systems in kids today. But Julie ran out of budget and we weren't able to do that for you. But people are deathly afraid of doing salad bars because of germs and kids touching food. I've been doing salad bars in District 11 for the last 15 years. It's nothing to be afraid of. Kids do quite well with it when you give them an opportunity. And it's a great way to serve farm fresh fruits and vegetables. So, questions before we depart? Run, Andy.
I was just wondering if you can talk a little bit about labor costs. I definitely understand how the food can be cost effective, but I'm wondering how it balances out when now, before you were putting burritos wrapped in plastic in the oven and now you're cooking, and the time it takes and the labor or for a centralized kitchen to staff that. So kind of how that works out financially and for your staff there.
You really have to take a look at your entire production schedule for the week and where you can fit it in. I mean, for instance, we know that, let's say that kitchen that's making the burritos has 5 staff members, let's just say 40 hours, labor hours, and that was in the budget prior to even deciding you're going to make these burritos. So now you take a look at, okay, well, I have these 40 hours. How do I structure my menu so that I can do these burritos now, as well as whatever else is going on that week? We, at District 11, we actually have 2 to 3 menu items for each elementary school every day for lunch. So it's a little bit more complicated than that. It's really a balancing act in what needs to be done when. So we don't put bean and cheese burritos. We don't make them do that at the same time we need to make something that's very high labor. Does that make sense? Okay, so it's just a nice little balancing act. And that's pretty much where I come into play in the district, because I know what's involved in making this happen.
I just want to mention that 2 of those items every day in elementary school is, one choice is a hard-boiled egg, 2 hard-boiled eggs and a wheat roll salad bar, where they can go through that salad bar that you just saw and get a reimbursable meal with the hard-boiled eggs and the roll. And that is a hugely popular and healthy lunch. And then the other is a sandwich, that we have very minimal waste on. So they're very cost-effective, low-cost items that we can do. So I think we're running out of time. We'll be around for the rest of the day, but thank you for giving me opportunities to hear about next steps.